Hello, Megan here. Um, so I had a bit of a rough morning, mostly just many struggles that I have with my son. One of the biggest things that I have that's like the biggest struggle for me is him eating. My son, again, has moderately functioning autism. So I guess that kind of means that he is fairly normal, but he definitely has his moments where he tends to veer off and spin and line up toys, so on and so forth. One of the things that comes along with autism is eating, and that's one of the biggest struggles that I have with my son is him eating. Not just picking out food, because believe it or not, my son is not a picky eater, but he is picky about how much he consumes. He doesn't really consume a lot. And as a parent, that kind of scares me. I think any parent would be scared sending their kid off to school with not even one bite of oatmeal because it wasn't hot, but he said it was too hot and he spit it out. I gave him a bagel. I gave him, you know, those little microwavable toasters thingies. All of it, not one single bite. But these are things that he normally eats on a regular basis. So, for a person like me who happens to have a mental capacity that's not very, I wouldn't say it's not very high because I do have a really high tolerance, I think, for most issues. But, that's one that always bothers me because he won't eat. And, tips and tricks are always welcome. The biggest trick that I have is I just like pretend that it's for me. Because when it's for me, he automatically wants it. He'll sit down and he'll dig right in. But when it's for him, he's like, eh. So one of the biggest tricks that I use is I just pretend everything is for me. But then that I feel like him growing up mentally, that's going to take his toll. Its toll. Like mom only cooked for herself. I had to just eat her table scraps. But that's not how it is. I want him to eat. I want him to be nourished. Who doesn't? Especially sending him off to school without nourishment, that bothers me the most because I can't force him to eat. I can only give him what I know he likes, and that's chocolate bottles. Chocolate bottles are like my godsend because it's literally just milk, and it used to be Pediasure, and then eventually that changed because Pediasure was giving him the shit something fierce. And then it was chocolate milk, like Fairlife, with regular milk mixed in, and that was too sugary because it was starting to rot his teeth. So we switched over. Now he's on just like the Horizon organic milk with almond milk because almond milk is the least sugary and it seems to be the best when it comes to his poop consistency because his consistency of his poop was off the charts. I mean, everywhere. So for me, getting him on the proper diet was big. When I went into the hospital, it wasn't figured out. I was going through a manic episode, therefore, my son was going through a manic episode, and he wasn't eating right. I wasn't eating right. I lost, I don't even know how much weight because I didn't weigh myself, but if I had to guess, I lost at least 10 pounds in under a week because I just wasn't eating. I was having a manic episode, so something inside me was telling me, don't eat, don't do anything. And unfortunately, because it was telling me to do that, it was bleeding over into my son. And I hate that. I hate that. I don't want anything that has to do with my mental capacity bleeding into my son because his mental capacity is already lower than standard. So I want to always make sure that, if anybody is good, he's always good. I laid food out for him. I gave him chocolate bottles. I did everything I could to get him to eat, but because I wasn't eating, he wasn't eating. There's one thing about autistic kids that I don't think anybody ever really talks about is the correlation between them and their parents. When you have a manic episode, your kid has a manic episode. When you're not eating, your kid isn't eating. And then if you are eating, hopefully they are too, but sometimes they just want to fight you. They just want to buck authority. When it comes to autism, I think kids with ASD, they just want to do it 10 times more because you're breaking their routine. If they're in the middle of playtime and lining up their toys and you say, okay, it's time to eat, that's breaking their routine. So it freaks them out to the point where maybe they don't eat. Maybe they aren't 100%. I'm just, as a parent, I'm at a loss because I need help. And the biggest help that I usually get is from my family. And right now, my family is just, we're kind of at odds ends because of my sickness. My manic episode led to, it led to a big family fight to where it's hard because not only am I sick, but somebody else I care about is very sick. And we all should be concentrating on her. But because my mind is broken, everybody's concentrating on me, and I don't want that. I want everybody to concentrate on the person who's really sick. I'm just happy that I got invited to Christmas Eve, to be perfectly honest. Because Christmas Eve, we usually have a family party, and I was really nervous that we weren't going to be able to go this year because of me, because of my delusions, and because of what's going on inside my head. I feel like I owe a lot of people apologies, and then there's other people I feel like I don't owe apologies to. My family is the number one group of people that deserve an apology. They deserve the biggest apology because I don't think they understood what was going on, and I scared them. Part of my delusion was I thought people were in my house. I kept hearing things, loud noises, and like my phone was getting taken from me, even though in reality I don't think that's what was happening. I think my phone was just being left places, and in my manic state I immediately assumed somebody was taking it, but nobody was taking it. Nobody was in my house. I just kept hearing these crazy things, and in my fear I left my house, and I went to a couple of different places where I just parked. One of the number one places I parked at was like a fire station, and the firefighters came out and they were all super nice to me, and they looked at me like they were concerned, and they gave me and my son food and water, and I really, really, really appreciate them, to be honest, because they didn't call the police. Neither did some of the other places that I ended up going to. Just kind of sitting there, and literally I was just sitting there listening to my stereo and reading the clouds and waiting for an absolution that I don't think ever came. Well, it did come, but it came after therapy and medication and things of that nature. I just, being bipolar and having a kid that's autistic, it adds a lot of extra pressure onto a situation that I didn't even realize was there until now. Hearing things, like I always attributed hearing things and seeing random things to being on drugs, but I'm not on drugs. So why am I still hearing things? Why am I hearing them so intensely? I'm going to take a short break.